So we'll call the meeting to order. I've got a little bit of introductory information and then we will get down to business. Our mission is empowering voters, defending democracy. We believe in the power of women and men to create a more perfect democracy. We're fully committed to DEI. I'm going rather quickly because I want us to have time for our panel. We're a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose any candidate or party, but we do have some issues that are important to us that have been carefully studied, and we act on those. So we educate, but we also do advocacy work, and not locally, but the state and the National League are involved in litigation. So this is Impact on Issues, and this is the latest version of a document that the League puts out every 2 years with positions on many, many, many different issues. And you can download it for free from the League of Women Voters US website. You can buy it for the great sum of $7 from Amazon. I find it's nice to have both versions. But anyway, this will inform what we're doing. All last year, it was all about the elections and how to vote and how to get registered and who was running and all that. Now that we have people elected, we're focusing on advocacy for the different issues that we believe in. And so today, one of the issues is educational vouchers. A few housekeeping things. We tape our meetings and put them on YouTube. You can just Google for the League, and that's going on. But we also, today we are live streaming to Facebook. And so Noelle will be taking any questions from Facebook when we do question and answer, period. If you don't want to be filmed, you need to be behind the cameras. because we're not moving them, we just have them there. Let's see, help yourself to refreshments. If you've not been here, the restrooms are all the way in the back behind that wall. Feel free to take home handouts, pens, lovely mementos, things like that. And there's more material at the registration table. We are happy to have you here today. Oh yes, their projector is not working, but there's a large monitor back there that you can see, but there's also one here. And so we're aware of that problem, so we will try to work accordingly. So Rebecca Keeler is going to give our close presentation.
Hello, I'm so glad you all braved the weather to come here. And today's inspirational quote comes from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who tells us that democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely, and that the real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education. So we're here for that, and we're going to pass the word around our communities. Please do, okay? Thank you.
Okay, I'm Dave Volgrath, and first of all, this is the format of today's program. I'm going to try to briefly summarize the context for the voucher proposal that's under consideration in the Tennessee State Legislature, give you some details of that, some of the concerns about that, and then we'll have a panel of presenting local views of this legislation, and finally, extra questions from the audience. On your table are some cards. If you would like to develop a question now for the panelists, Ramsey McGowan will come by and pick those up and pose those in addition to the prepared questions to the panel. So be thinking about that as we talk about the context of this proposal. Here we'll talk a bit about the national picture, then the Tennessee developments and real recent developments. In fact, the slide is out of date because different organizations are lining up pro and con so rapidly that I prepared it early in the week, and there are some things that it's already out of date. So what's the national context of educational vouchers? As of January 2024, there were about 23 different sorts of voucher programs in 13 states and the District of Columbia. Some of the different varieties of these voucher programs, there are educational savings account programs. There's a tax credit for scholarship to private school program. In 2024 election cycle, some states put educational vouchers on the ballot for citizens. Tennessee's not a state that does that, except for constitutional amendments. And these vouchers were defeated in Kentucky, Nebraska, and Colorado. Over time, and this is looking back over maybe 10 years or so, programs that were begun as a focus on low-income students, on students with disabilities, more targeted programs seem to be growing and expanding to universal, and that's the pattern that we see here in Tennessee. We started off with a special education scholarship program in 2015, and then the governor proposed a educational savings account program in 2019. That now has about 3,500 students in the 3 largest counties. I want to give time for the panelists, so we won't go into the gory details of it. In the 23-24 legislative session, there were actually 3 different bills introduced, one by the governor, one in the Senate, one in the House, and they just couldn't come to consensus. One broad observation is that the Senate kind of balked at the cost of all of the incentives that were put in the House version. And there were also disagreements on details, for example, testing that private schools would have to have or not have in order to be recipients of these vouchers. More recent developments. The governor has launched an ad campaign funded by outside groups, the Americans for Prosperity, the American Federation for Children. The emphasis seems to be on parental choice and freedom as the key arguments for the universal vouchers. Area officials are lining up, taking positions on this. Among legislatures, Hicks has said yes, Alexander and Hawk no. Others are waiting to see what is actually proposed or how the discussions go in the committees, subcommittees, and on the floor if it gets there. Let's see. One of our members called and asked Representative Harshbarger, and an aide there said he was leaning against the voucher proposal. 7 county mayors in Northeast Tennessee have said that they are in favor of this. They appreciate the governor's balanced approach to disaster aid and educational opportunities. And a whole bunch of school boards have said no. Washington County, Sullivan County, Kingsport Schools, Elizabethton School very recently this week said no. I guess a year ago, Johnson City School said no.
We're also saying no again Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning, okay. Breaking news, you heard it here first. Okay, so what is in this governor's proposal, SB1 HB1? The first year that this would be in effect, the school year 25-26, there would be 20,000 vouchers offered. 10,000 of them would be targeted to limited income, disability, and the students who are currently under the educational savings account programs in those 3 largest counties. Okay. In the future years, if applications were 175% of the applications in the previous year. 5,000 additional scholarships would kick in or become available. And the priority of who would be eligible is, again, a mix of those students who were getting the vouchers in the first year of the program, limited income, some disability students, and the exact definition of limited income bounces around from year to year. In the first year, it's 300% of the free lunch level, which amounts to $178,000 household income for four. In the second year, I think the income limit drops down to 100% of school lunch level. And again, there are additional vouchers that are available regardless of income level. Students must waive their rights to special education services typically provided by the public school districts in order to receive these scholarships. Private schools get to choose whether they will require the students who are receiving the vouchers to take a national standardized test that's appropriate to their private school status, or the public school test, the TCAP. Private schools also get to choose their admissions policies, their curriculum, their hiring policies and practices. So the legislation says, let's be clear, these private schools are not agents of the state of Tennessee, and there shall be no restrictions on their creed, their philosophy, or these policies and practices. Okay, in the case, this is the hold harmless thing that especially Representative Hicks is talking about as the reason why he is for this. In case of an enrollment decline in a public school system, the TISA dollars, which is the new statewide funding formula for education, would remain the same at $7,075 at the current calculation. Public school teachers would receive a one-time $2,000 bonus. 80% of the sports betting tax, sports wagering tax, that's now allocated into the lottery for educational scholarships would be diverted to public school construction and maintenance budget based on, and this would be administered by the state treasurer. And the state treasurer must consider all of the following, and I've listed just a bit, based on the economic distress of the county, the disaster damage in the county, and there's another phrase that's like any need indicated by the local educational, that is the public school district. So basically everybody can make a case to the treasurer, and the treasurer has to somehow consider all the cases based on these different rationales in deciding how much of that money would get allocated. And the amount is not really equal to the capital needs across the state. It might build a building or two a year. Okay. So what are some of the concerns that have been voiced about this proposal? They fall into two groups, very roughly, assessment of student outcomes and funding and fiscal impact. In terms of assessing the student outcomes, there's less assessment than in the private schools than in the public. There would be no A to F state report card as there is with public schools. There would be no sort of calling on the carpet or hearings if a school earned a C, D, or F sort of a rating. Under the bill, as I said before, the privates could choose whether they're going to take some sort of national standardized test or administer the TCAP. In the existing program in the 3 counties, they are required to administer the TCAP to the students. And so to date, it turns out that students who receive the educational scholarships score lower on the TCAP in math and in English than do the public students, school students in those same 3 counties. It's not uniform. There's one case in Shelby County where the publics score lower than the ESA students on, I think it's math, and they're equal on the English and language arts. What's the national research on the effects of voucher programs on student outcomes? In terms of academics, they're mostly negative or insignificant differences for the students who are receiving the vouchers. Non-academic things like high school graduation rates, there are mixed effects, but the researchers point out that there's a confound that students who typically take the ESA or the vouchers come from higher income households. These are the households in many cases that are already able to afford private school tuition, and there are other good things we know from research that come from being a child in a wealthy household as opposed to an impoverished household. What about the the concerns with funding and fiscal impact? One broad one is what would the state be committing to if they indeed want to sustain this program? And it grows. The voucher costs are very large in other states, and there are case studies of Arizona and some other states that are realizing they cannot sustain the universal voucher programs. It's just too expensive. Scholarship costs plus hold harmless costs will accrue to every student who gets the voucher. So it's $7,075 to the student, and then it's $7,075 to the school districts that lost that student. How will private tuition be affected? Again, in other states, some private schools have raised the tuition or added fees now that their pool is empowered with an additional amount of money from the state government. In Tennessee, the $7,075 scholarship would be less than the average cost of a private school annual tuition, which is $11,000 plus. Now, average scores are affected by extremes, so I don't know what the median score is. It might be a little bit lower, but it's still likely to be substantially larger than the $7,000 scholarship. How are these voucher funds going to be managed? It's in order to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse, there's going to have to be more bureaucracy to watch the transactions as the state transfers the money to either the individuals or the school districts. Okay, the panel. Ramsey, would you like to introduce our speakers?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Dave.
Sure. Do you want to advance the questions or should we? Okay.
So, I'd like to welcome today 3 panelists that we're very lucky to have to share their expertise and their experience. They represent a broad range of experience in Tennessee public education. You have on your tables a brief biography of each of them, so I'm not going to take up a lot of time going over the details. We have Dr. Steve Barnett, who is the current superintendent of Johnson City Schools. We have Kathy Hall, who is currently serving on the Johnson City School Board and previously has been its chair. And we have Lynn Honeycutt, who is a public educator with 32 years experience. She wanted to make sure she was understood as speaking for herself and her perspective as a public educator as her career, not as a representative of any school system. So, thank you all for being here. And we appreciate your willingness to come on a Sunday afternoon. So our first question is pretty broad. We'd just like your perspective, maybe one or two things that you think are most important for us to understand about the legislation and the educational vouchers concept. And I'll just let whoever wants to start. She never, so she's not been able to get, I'm so sorry, microphone to work. She's even looked for a second microphone, so. And
We'll talk loud. Dave, you did a great job of laying this out for everybody. I thought that, so unequal accountability is something that you mentioned. These are state dollars. So there's been some comment that these are state dollars, these are not local dollars. These are our dollars. We're state taxpayers, whether it's property tax, sales tax, whatever, gas tax, everything that we spend money or provide a tax for. So the burden on the taxpayers in the state of Tennessee is going to increase. That is a huge problem. And with that happening, there's money going to private schools without the accountability model following. So how are you really going to know as a taxpayer if the school is effective? What we've heard right now is, well, the parents are pleased with what's going on in the school. As an educator of over 32 years, I have had the opportunity to be the principal of 4 schools and the superintendent of 1 system, and then to work as a teacher and run a lot of different programs too. We had students come into each one of those schools from private schools, and we would do assessments, norm reference, as is mentioned in the law, as in the bill, excuse me. And we would have students that came in and performed really well, but we have a lot of students also that came in and really struggled. So that's why it's really important to have that equal type of assessment for students. So you really know you're measuring apples to apples. And I think the parents that would take advantage of this sort of funding for a private school deserve that as well, as a parent to know, is this really truly more effective than what I was receiving in a public school? I really think the governor's heart is that he wants to help students that are disadvantaged. If that's the case, what I've seen is most of this money, 60 to 90%, is going to go to students that are already in private schools, which means those parents have already made that choice to place their child in a private school setting. So there's money that's gone off the table. We really are not sure how those schools, how effective those schools are teaching and what students are learning. We do know that in a public school because the amount of assessment that we have is a lot. It's really more assessment than we need or should require. So if you're going to allow private schools to have the norm referenced assessment, I think for a fair measuring stick, you need to have that same measurement, whether it's criterion reference like we have now, or a nationally normed assessment, which we had for years and years in Tennessee up until about 2002 with the onset of No Child Left Behind. I probably should let somebody else speak.
And one thing about the assessment, our TCAP tests are a really hard test. Some people say, well, only 40% of students in Tennessee pass the English part. Well, they're designed to be a very difficult test. If our students took the Virginia test, our numbers would look very different. So if you're looking at TCAP or a nationally normed test, you're going to see some very different results. My biggest point on the whole voucher thing is somehow public schools have started to feel like the enemy or of our legislators, and we are created by our legislators. Tennessee has public schools because our Constitution says we have public schools. And so if the point of these vouchers is to help students in schools that aren't doing well, the answer is not to take some of those students out and leave the rest with no additional funding or help and expect it to succeed. So if there's extra money to be had, like double dipping on this, sending a student to a private school and also doing the hold harmless, let's take that money and really focus on some of the schools that are failing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so I have two things that stick out to me whenever I read the bill. And thank you for having me. I've read the bill in its entirety too, and then also just trying to do some research across the state and see how it's affecting other districts and what other, urban areas, even Nashville, places like Knoxville are saying about this. Two things that stick out to me as red flags. One of them is this term autonomy. And to me, being a German teacher and teaching history, there is the opposite of autonomy set up in our government. We have will of the governed consent, and you have no say in what is happening in these schools. So yes, they're saying they're going to give this test, but in public schools, we get data back, we work with that data is public, and then we have intervention. We don't know what these schools are doing for these kids who may not score well. So that's a big deal. And then this double dipping of the funds, this $2,000 bonus feels much like a bribe. And I would love to have known where that was for the last 23 years of my career, because close your ears, husband, I feel like I would have loved to have had access to that if it was available for some, where's this coming from? And that's not gonna be a drop in the bucket to me to change my opinion on educating the whole child and the community relationships we build and community partners that we have. And also with that, in high school, it's much different than even when I went to high school. It's a whole community. There's the basic subjects and core, but we have community partners coming in and working with our students on allowing them to take classes that may not be available at our school through places like Niswanger. We have Ballad coming in and working with our future nurses and offering programs. We're just starting that at Elizabethton. We have a program in Elizabethton called, a company called Fesco, a German company, who came in and did a grant where we have huge amounts of high quality equipment that the kids are learning to use, CMM machines and lathes, and those people want to know where their money's going. So can they ask these private schools for accountability, or is autonomy going to override that? So those are things for me as a teacher that stick out.
So,
Can I go back and mention
now that
the
you've
other?
listened to each other, go ahead and take a moment and get a chance to finish your thoughts.
Really important comment Mrs. Hall made about Virginia versus Tennessee. We have the advantage of being so close to Virginia that we, get their news media is ours as well. If you look at their SOL assessment, standards of learning, compare it to the TCAP, there's a huge difference between the gap between what a student appears to learn in Virginia and what a student appears to be, one that appears to be proficient in Virginia as opposed to Tennessee. If you look at NAEP assessment, which is talked about all the time, National Assessment of Educational Progress, 4th grade, 8th grade, look at those assessments. We are within a couple of points of each other, Tennessee and Virginia. So it's just a different test that their students take each year. Ours is designed to be very, very rigorous. It's one of the most rigorous assessments in the country. I don't complain about that. It's our job to continue to teach and to make sure that our students continue to grow and learn. And I think we do a great job, but that is a wonderful comparison of using one test versus another test. But we all take the same NAEP assessment. So I think that's a great comparison.
Any other thoughts about that? Okay.
I do want to have one other thing. I didn't finish my thought about students that this bill is designed to help. So I mentioned the students that are already in private school. Students in our highest poverty neighborhoods in Johnson City are not going to be able to take advantage You're gonna have to test into a school. You are going to have to have transportation to that school and home from that school. They're not gonna provide the things that we provide, like transportation, meals every day, before and after school programming that these students desperately need so their parents can go to work and do the things that they need to do. So I am skeptical about how many of our students who are in our highest poverty population are going to be able to take advantage of any type of program like this.
And that's Johnson City. I think of too, the county, I mean, let's look at Johnson County or Carter County. They're saying that this $7,075 will provide transportation. Most of these schools are the tuition is gonna be probably close to or more than that. So then it's gonna be on the families to get them from a place like Johnson County to the closest probably school in Johnson City. And that's just not feasible for those families, you know, so.
Thank you. So in terms of funding issues and the financial implications, both for the state budget and local school funding, what are your thoughts about that related to the voucher program?
TISA funding, first of all, has been helpful. The increase, the change in the formula to TISA, I applaud the state legislature for doing that. The increased funding has helped with a lot of things, academic supports, also mental health, safety that needed to be improved in our schools. It's been a support to us.
And career technical classes.
Career technical classes are weighted, so we can receive more funding for career technical education as well. So those are positives. TISA is set up that after a year, if you have a reduced enrollment, then that follows after a year. So the idea that this funding is going to stay when you have a decreased enrollment in your school, it's just not going to happen. It's not something that can continue. It's not sustainable. So if you take a school system about the size of Sullivan County, around 10,000 students, a little bit, a couple of thousand larger than us, if they lose 2% of their students, given the fact that 60 to 90% of the students have already chosen to be in those private schools, the ones that would take advantage of the voucher, you have a situation where if they lost 2%, they lose over $1.4 million in funding. So with that happens, and that's off their TISA funding, not their overall. You have local funding that also, and federal funding that comes into school districts. So that's just off their state funding formula that comes in. When that happens, you're going to make decisions. The school system is going to cut back and do the things that they can to make sure they make their budget. But about 80 to 82% of our budget is people, the people we employ. There's teachers, teaching assistants, all the support staff. So at some point it will have a negative impact on day-to-day functions of our school district. Because as I said earlier, you're essentially funding two school, two types of programs, public and private.
I'd like to point out that there are a whole lot of counties in this state that don't have a private school. So only out of the 95 counties, only 44 of them have a private school that would apply here. So, I have issues with Johnson City's funding, but I'm looking at those schools, those people that are paying these taxes, their taxes are going to, the amount of their taxes that are going towards education is going to increase where they have no ability to even use a voucher, or they have to travel quite a ways to get to one. So I think this doesn't seem fair to the entire state. Places like Johnson City that have options, there might be students that use a voucher, but there are a whole lot of counties that would not be able to access this at all.
That's for sure. And I mean, when you look at other states, I think that we can see that what it's doing is it's causing these states, I think Arkansas, West Virginia, Arizona, they're having to either increase their taxes by something like $295 million a year, some of the estimates that I read, or dip into their reserves. And in my opinion, those reserves are for things like what we had in the fall, where we had, a school that closed down. Regardless, and this, I certainly am not here to place blame, but having been a Hampton High School graduate, it's heartbreaking to see that there wasn't that reserve immediate, and so we had teachers going to UTSU digging through old staplers so that they could have school. And so to me, that's what a reserve is for. And so I really worry about what that money will, where it will go and things like that.
I can also tell you, this seems to be tied in the special session, vouchers and relief funds. If they truly are tied together and travel together, I think that is unethical. I think it is not. We're not getting vouchers based on how our legislators feel about vouchers. And it puts some people in a horrible position to have to decide, how they're going to vote on this. So I don't know, right now, there's been rumors about this forever. So we don't know exactly what's gonna happen in the special session. But tying those two things together, to me, does not seem fair or like a good plan.
Renee Rogers is our new representative in the Elizabeth City. And I taught her kids at Unipoy. She's a friend, and she was a director of our school boards for a while. She's very pro public education. And so I've been messaging with her, and she's told me that she plans to vote no on the voucher bill. That's off, that's me talking to her. But she did mention that she thinks it will be 3 separate votes. There'll be one on the vouchers, one on the relief funding, and one on immigration. And so I'm not sure what that, obviously will look like, but that's what she told me. But it is interesting that it's kind of been put off to this special session. To me, like, these schools, these districts needed funding immediately. Yes. And there's a lot of talk about how that's being held, at a federal level. And I feel like the state, in my opinion, there just could have been a different reaction there. Not to try to point fingers, but there was definitely things that I was very surprised that weren't happening, that you would just assume would happen behind the scenes.
Having said that, our legislators have one of the most difficult jobs, and I don't want to criticize anyone for choices that they make for what's best for their county.
It does appear, when you look at the bill, it's at the end of the bill, the relief funding, which doesn't say relief funding, it's capital funding, which is in the bill at the end, which does seem to mingle the two together, which to me should be a totally separate topic. You have Hampton community that totally lost their high school, which also goes along their vocational school. They have 2 buildings there. They have the high school, and then they have their vocational school. So those students are having to travel to the north end of the county to Keeneburg Elementary School. And all of us reached out to try to help them however we could with supplies and desks, whatever they needed. But what they need at the end of the day, at the end of the session and everything, is for Hampton, for the people in Carter County to have a plan, to know we're going to get help so we can get our high school built back, somewhere else.
And we have a couple more questions with the panel before we take audience questions. But if I know several people have written them down, Ruth's going to come around and pick them up, and that way we can go ahead and be prepared, not try to ask duplicates or whatever. So, thank you. So there are many other aspects besides funding and initial provisions of this proposed legislation. So we have issues like educational quality for all children, fairness and access to quality education, accountability, the tenet that public education is a public good and benefits society as a whole, as well as many other things I'm sure our educators can talk about. So in addition to funding and specific aspects of the legislation, are there things you think should be under consideration by citizens or legislators related to those aspects?
One of the things that I think gets a little misunderstood, and I'm going to go back to dollars again, but the $7,075 is the state portion of what we get for each student for TISA And then they start adding on things. Students cost different amounts to educate. You can have a student with, a CDC student with severe disabilities that has a full-time person with them, and that they cost a lot more to educate than that $7,000. You can have students that are ESL, English language learners, and they cost more. So, and public schools educate everyone, and we do that joyfully. We are there for every child and do whatever it takes. Putting that price tag of $7,075 on each, on every student makes it think that that's what is spent on every student. The students that the private schools will take will not be the more expensive students. They will not be the students that have a lot of extra needs. So, to me, it concerns me that students are put in one kind of little hopper, and this is how much they cost. That's not true. And so taking some students that cost less to educate out of a system just puts more strain on that system.
Well, and I think that speaks to as well, like the experiences that they have with encountering different cultures, coexisting with people. Being in class with someone from a different socioeconomic background. My daughter's a product of public schools, and those are invaluable things that they're going to be definitely in a different pocket of children than what they will see on a daily basis. And I mean, those experiences to me are extremely valuable for empathy and seeing in their communities what's needed. And I think that's going to be something that we'll lose with that as well.
We gladly teach all children. The parents send us the best children they have, and we take them and we teach them, and we love them and care for them, and make sure they're safe and have the things that they need to be successful, and we challenge them. I've always said I want every child to have the opportunity to do that, everyone to get at least a good education. It's incumbent upon the children how hard they're willing to work for it as well to get a great education. So you can come through our school systems and get a great education. You are going to get a good education at least. We do not get to pick and choose who comes. And I think that we have fantastic processes if a parent wants for their child to transfer from one school to another, they can do that. We have opportunities in our region for tuition. And we have some quality private schools that already serve a niche in our communities, and we value those students in those schools. And the ones that require some types of supports, they do get some of those supports from us. So even that language in the bill bothers me, that someone would give up all their rights to any kind of special ed support just simply because they went to a private school. I think there are just a lot of problems when you try to intermingle public funding for private schools, and I think that those are just some of those.
I do think supports are such an important part of this. I mean, for me, we take a lot of theory in education classes, but one of the things that stuck out the most to me is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that is when we have a kid, if they're hungry or they have something to worry about, they're not going to be able to learn. And so one of the problems I have is that some of these teachers that come in, they're not trained properly sometimes. That doesn't mean that they're not intelligent or they're not versed in their area, but we have to make sure that we're serving that whole child. And those supports can look like special education. They can also look like a snack and a jacket that we got from our social worker. And are we getting those in these private schools? You could have kids who their parents want to take advantage of that, but they don't have all of those support services. And that's something that I value a lot of, especially about Elizabeth and City. They are very open to sitting down, having a conversation, and you should be able to come in and have those conversations, make decisions if you need to move your child around. And so we do have that parent, relationship, and it builds within the community. I mean, that's very important.
Johnson City Schools have put a lot of dollars into mental health services for our students over the past 15 years, and we continue to increase it, and I think that's important. But I want to make it clear, I think having choices for schools is a good thing. I think if a parent really wants to homeschool their child, and that's a good fit for them, that's fine. And if there's a private school, there's all sorts of options. But what we're talking about is using public tax dollars which should go to public schools.
Yeah, yes.
So, any final comments before we move on to, oh, no more. One more. So what are your recommendations for how we advocate with our legislators, with people in positions of authority and influence in our communities related to SB 182?
I would go back to what Mrs. Hall said. They have a very hard job. They have taken a lot of information from a lot of people. They have a lot of pressure put on them when they go to Nashville. So I think I would encourage you to reach out via email, phone call. If you have the phone number and your local legislator communicates with you by text, I would text them, call them, email them. And make sure that they know how you feel about this important subject. I think that they'll be responsive, and I think that they'll appreciate to hear from you. I do that, and on things that are not education related with the legislators. Email and text is something I do quite a bit. You know, if you look at a place like Johnson City, you have some outlying areas in Sullivan County and Carter. So we have Renee Jones on the south end, who represents the Carter County part of the city. And we have Bobby Harshbarger and Timothy Hill, who represent Piney Flats, which is mostly Johnson City as well. So I would include them. You have a number of different legislators that you can reach out to.
And as you do that, make sure you make them know that you understand that they have a hard job, and there's a tremendous amount of pressure on our legislators. The governor's putting pressure on everyone to kind of get this through. So make sure that they understand, that it's a tough job, but that this is how you feel, and you are in their district.
Another thing I would say, because those are both things that I had on my list of advocacy, but having conversations with just your everyday person to educate them, and do that in a way that's not just sharing a meme on social media. We have this very big problem, I think, where people just believe anything that they see and they take that for the law and gospel. And so if you do use social media, which I see no problems with that, but just being responsible and being willing to talk to people in a way that you understand where they're coming from. Let me talk to you about a different way. And there's so much division right now, and just having those bridges built of understanding each other's point of view is very important.
But I'll have to tell you, out of all the conversations I've had about vouchers with people, non-legislators, I probably have only run into one person that was for it. So I think the majority of citizens, just as it didn't pass when it was put on a ballot in other states, I don't think the majority of citizens are for vouchers. And so I think the more people that communicate with their legislators and they see that the wide variety of people that are not for vouchers, the better.
This is just me talking, not the panelists, but one thing in terms of advocacy I would ask people to consider is, don't just advocate when you disagree with someone. If there are legislators who are supporting the position, thank them and acknowledge that you feel like they're doing a good job when it comes to balancing those difficult decisions. So, okay, are we okay to move forward with some of the audience? We have questions from Facebook and from those in attendance here. I apologize, I can't read some handwriting, so we may not get to all.
Pass it over here.
I
can translate it for you.
Yeah.
I have awful handwriting, I might be able to decode it.
Okay, well, we'll get to that point, I'll hand them over. So some of them have to do with very specific details. I'll go ahead and take care of those first, if that's okay. Some people wanted to know how homeschooling fits into the voucher programs. Are vouchers able to be used for homeschooling? And would homeschooling families be affected in any way? Not just, vouchers going to people who homeschool.
At this point, as far as everything I read, homeschooling is not part of the voucher program. So they should not be affected other than their taxpayers.
Yeah, that's how I understood it when I read it as well.
And even if you, even church-based homeschool consortiums, I guess, are not included.
So what I do think, and this is just me, is that this is kind of the catalyst, and then I feel like there's just this, and this is maybe because I'm paranoid, but there's like this group of, I feel like there's loopholes in the works for some of these, and I can guarantee you that if this is the first, and this gets passed, there will be addendums and amendments that do allow some of these things that we do have bigger concerns about that we're not addressing right now, because this is reading in a way that says, oh, we're not gonna do that, you're gonna keep your money, and so I do think that, yeah, on the front end, maybe, but even the bill about, the money staying in the districts, that says after 1 year, right? It doesn't go on and say forever, you'll just be.
In addition to questions about homeschooling, this person wanted to know if there were outside influences that you felt were a part of shaping the voucher initiative in Tennessee, and identified a couple of them.
Yes.
That have been influential in the past, like Princeton College, or we know the funding for the ads or whatever. Is that an issue that people need to be concerned about?
I think it's an issue people need to be concerned about. If this was purely something that was organic to Tennessee that came up as, hey, this is a better way to maybe serve some students, but really believe that a lot of this is outside influence, which is, as a Tennessee taxpayer, I think that's a negative, because you have outside influence coming in, influencing how Tennessee state tax dollars are spent.
I think from the beginning of the voucher discussion, there have been outside groups on a national basis that have been pushing this agenda.
I agree. And other things as well. I mean, almost, there's definitely a sentiment of kind of an anti-public school, just feel in certain circles, and I'm sure there's a lot of money behind that.
Thank you. This person was asking about the national scene, and sort of something Ms. Honeycutt sort of alluded to, and that is, once voucher programs get established, are there any states that have rescinded them or responded to concerns about cost overruns in a way that, change the impact on public schools in a positive way?
Oh, I only have negative.
Well,
I mean, I'm sure that I can, I'm sure that they,
I don't know.
I mean, there's anecdotal information that we receive about states that have run into big budget troubles because they're trying to fund these vouchers that were not necessarily being successful.
I know in West Virginia, something that I read is that they've closed 25 public high schools. When you close a public high school, the community kind of dissolves. I mean, in Elizabeth, and our public high school is the heart of our community. And so when that happens, that's just disastrous in my opinion. The public high schools are closed.
But as far as your question goes to, have there been essentially positive changes in the state to correct? I'm not aware of any. I don't know that.
This is another specific question. It is, how much of a public school teacher's salary is supported by TISA funds?
It depends on the system, because
State funds.
state funds, because your ability to pay plays into that also. So Johnson County, whose ability to pay is less than Johnson City, more of their salary would be done by TISA. I would say it's about 60% for us.
In Johnson City,
Mhm.
about 60% is paid for by state dollars. So the rest comes locally?
Yes,
Local funding? Okay.
yes.
But mostly local.
It's important information.
And that's county and city dollars, by the way, when you say local, it's county and city.
For us.
Tax dollars.
Yes.
And for Elizabeth.
Okay. You may have sort of alluded to this, but I'll go ahead. This person still had the question. If the voucher program is passed, will it put pressure on local school boards, and budgets to increase, teacher salaries to retain teachers? I'm not sure exactly.
I'll do my little spiel on, our board has always had as a goal, at least for the last 20 years, to be in the top 10 systems in the state for teacher pay. And we do that as a strategy. That's how we hire, how we hire the best teachers we can. Will there be pressure to keep up with private schools? I'm not sure, but what I worry more about is there are gonna be less funds with which to do that.
Yeah.
So, taking away money from public schools will make that very difficult. This $2,000 bonus is a one-time thing, that is not a yearly thing. The governor set out some lofty goals of $50,000 for a starting pay for a starting teacher several years ago. We hit that. The state has one more year to achieve that, right?
Yes.
We hit that last year. I'm not sure teacher pay is gonna be the biggest issue here.
What you will have though, I think, is that you'll lose teacher positions that you can fund, which will increase your student to teacher ratio. So that's something we pride ourselves on in Elizabeth. And my biggest class right now only has 20 students, and that's a great, that's excellent. Which I teach very, abstract classes, but we know that the more we can have individual relationships and conversations with those students, and so when you start to have to cut those, then I'm going to be taking and combining those classes, and that's going to affect the overall outcome.
I think it could put a larger burden over time on the local taxpayers to keep up. Because what could happen is the state funding becomes flat. If the state funding becomes flat, you're still gonna have to do cost of living raises. And when that happens, it's gonna have to come from someplace. If you reduce staff, or you increase local taxes, or both.
And they're telling us we're going to lose hope money, hope lottery money, that I personally relied upon for my daughter for college. I mean, they're going to at least send out some of those funds that way. So.
There's a recommendation that we all talk louder.
Okay.
Sorry.
And I'm watching outside and maybe faster.
Tennessee has set aside $144 million for vouchers. Do you have a sense of if that is actually going to be the cost of the voucher program? Or will it be?
No, it's based on the 20,000 students.
Well, I read an article in the Tennessean that was much more. I mean, an estimate was much more. And I think that that's just a brief, once they're not taking into consideration the administration of, and the delegation and all of that, that's just the basic cost. So.
Yeah, if you just take the basic cost of each voucher going to each private school, you're leaving out all the administrative costs at the state level. The employees that had to be hired are going to have to be hired to administer the program, and I think that's a low ball, especially over time.
In terms of local politicians, not legislators, we saw that the county mayors, many of them had supported them. How about other local politicians like the city commissions or city mayors or other people in the local legislative process? Any awareness of that?
I will tell you that we had a legislative breakfast with our legislators a few weeks ago, and I think I heard both Rusty Crowe and Rebecca Alexander say they know that all of the elected officials that they serve, at that point, it was before the mayors came out, but at that point, we're against vouchers, and that had to say something to them. I don't know of a single school board that has voted in favor of vouchers, and I know that our city commission has been supportive of our stand.
I can't imagine, and Elizabeth and I know some of the commissioners that would definitely speak out against, I'm sure, but I just appreciate that our board is willing to pass those resolutions. That means a lot to teachers when you know that you just have the support of your elected board.
This is sort of going going back to the beginning, but one person wanted clarification of what Governor Lee is suggesting the benefit is to the voucher program for students in schools.
That's a no. I get asked that on a regular basis, and
Okay. Okay. I believe the answer to this is no, right? Okay, so the question is there a chance that Tennessee voters could see a referendum as opposed to it being a legislatively determined decision, so that Tennessee voters could vote yes or no on the
I haven't
vouchers?
heard any.
I haven't heard any talk of that.
My understanding is, like Dave said, the Tennessee Constitution does not allow that. Voters only vote on constitutional amendments, otherwise the legislature makes these decisions. This one is, we're almost through all the audience questions, one more. If legislators change one aspect of this proposed legislation, SB 1, HB 1, what would you think the right focus would be? How should they?
Is the question like, is there one part of this that, more than anything, that we would like to see change? For me, it would be accountability, because that's what we're held to in public schools, and so just at the accountability of having, certified teachers and test data that is available. And they're saying it's gonna be published, but I mean, you have to go look for that. It's very, here in public schools, you get that on all sorts of different things now, and I just can't imagine that we're gonna be able to just easily find this data that's gonna be out there. So accountability for me.
I think this is one thing, and it is accountability and selective enrollment. Those go hand in hand, because that's a form of accountability. So if you say, okay, you're gonna have the same accountability, and you also are gonna take whatever student comes to you in open arms, come to our school, you're welcome. That's then essentially, it levels a playing field. And, we have students that we have to give a lot of grace to, and families sometimes that we give grace. And they need to have that same expectation. If they do that in the bill, then that's a game changer. Same accountability, same open enrollment.
And making sure that the accountability is the same test. I think TCAP, if the TCAP is the standard for public schools, the TCAP should be the standard. Because if you're comparing TCAP and NAEP scores, they're very different.
And responding to that, I mean, they can give a test all day and say, here's our data, we're moving on. They don't have the accountability to then do something about any negative aspects of it.
I'm a special student who has illegible cursive.
Transition.
Yeah.
If your question hasn't been addressed, this would be the time we can open it up.
I'm a special student with illegible cursive. The accountability is most interesting to me as well on the side of what you teach. Because it seems to me from what was said here, that I would be a wise person to open a communist training school and make it a private school and have people use their vouchers to pay me, so that Tennessee tax dollars would be used for training people in a communist school. And the way this bill is set up, they cannot ask me what I teach or hold me accountable for that content. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm sure the Attorney General would still look at
It's,
go-
within
let's
the
go
bounds
with
as a voucher.
Let's go with a milder example.
No, what I wanted to do was, this is the logician die reductio ad absurdum. Yes, the bill supports this absurdity. And Dr. Barnett said the governor is concerned with helping special interest students then why in the bill does it say that if you're a special interest student, you have to sign away your rights to special support?
Right.
Clearly
I
that
don't
is-
think he's, I think it's students that come from high poverty communities, which is different.
Yes.
Economically disadvantaged students, I think is the premise behind, or that's originally what his thoughts were. And
What qualifications are there for these teachers and people who have these private schools? Do they have to go through the same rigorous accreditation that you all have had to go through? Is there any regulation or? So
No.
basically,
No, and as far as teacher qualifications, as far as having to pass assessments, become licensed, not all private schools require the same licensure that we require as well. So you may have a math teacher here at Science Hill that's had to pass and demonstrate the ability to understand calculus at a very high level. You may not have to pass that in other schools,
so basically,
in private schools.
a barber or a masseuse would have to go through more certification processes than somebody who wants to open up a private school.
I think we need to be careful about,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
not sure.
I really think we need to be
There are a
careful
lot
about,
of private schools with excellent teachers,
there
I
are
don't wanna
private
suggest
schools, and
otherwise.
there are classes of private schools, non-public schools in Tennessee with different levels of accreditation. So let's just leave that at that, and we need to thank our panelists, greatly. I've learned a lot, it's been very helpful and, informative and enriching, and, we'll be wrapping up with Gwen.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thanks for letting us be here.
Yes.
Very informative, and I'm so glad we've gotten it on tape, and you can, if you wanna watch it again or refer a friend, it'll be on our YouTube channel. So join us at our next meetings on February 16th, reproductive rights. And we haven't chosen the next topics, but like I said, we're working on advocacy and some positions, and we hope to have extremely informative sessions there too. Thank you for coming. Take food with you. They don't take it back,
Go
so.
buy red milk.